everyone, and welcome back to Trailing Spouses. And on this episode, we are going to talk about a very important topic. We're going to talk about the actual title of trailing spouse, what that means, how it's defined, and the evolution of going from trailing spouse to supporting spouse, and also what it means for the spouse that you come here for, because I like to affectionately refer to them as the dragging spouse, because if I'm trailing, somebody's dragging me. And we want them to evolve from dragging spouse to sponsoring spouse or accompanying spouse or supporting. Something about the narrative that we need to change about these labels, not only linguistically, but also in action.
Today is a very, very deep topic because it's so easy to change the language. It's so easy to play around with words. It's so easy to get caught up in, well, I'm no longer a trailing spouse. I'm now a supportive spouse or an accompanying spouse. In fact, in a lot of the governmental roles, they don't, they actually call us accompanying spouse.
Yes.
Whereas in all senses of the word, you're actually a trailing spouse because somebody done uprooted you and pulled you and dragged you into their life and into their role, into their dream, into their goal, into their job. It might not have been intentional because people do get promotions at work.
Yes.
And they go where they're appointed to go after they make, a good conclusion of their situation. Mm-hmm. However, when you're in this position as a spouse, you can't exactly say, well, I'm going to sit this one out. We'll see you later.
Right.
There's so many dynamics.
But that doesn't really work.
You can. And some other people have done it, and each to his own. Mm-hmm. But in this particular time, we both chose to say we're going to accompany our spouses and we're going to support them where they are and support our family. But there's a huge change that happened. I don't know about you, but for me, from being a trailing spouse and then evolving for myself, for my family, mostly for myself. I'm going to be selfish about this one. Because if I couldn't get my mind right and my head straight, I couldn't have been the supportive spouse that I think I am today, or the supportive mother and sister and friend that I am today. So the evolution process is very shaky waters for a lot of people. Even for me today, I still struggle with that.
Yeah, I think it's always a struggle. I think, it's great that you're called the accompanying spouse. At least the narrative has evolved. But whatever label that you put on it, the process, as you said, the process is still the same. The journey is still the same for many, in that you are uprooting your life for the support of your spouse. And I love the way you put that, is that you and I chose this choice. And it is a choice. And it is something that you should consider and take into consideration deeply. Because when you choose to say, I'm going to support my spouse and I'm going to possibly forego the trajectory of the career path that I was on, that's a huge consideration. One in which you cannot then make your spouse pay for. And I'll explain what I mean by that.
Easy.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
And but you can't take out the collective choice and the individual choice that you made to say, yes, I will sign up for this and do this. You can't take it out on them, and you cannot shift the responsibility of your happiness, of your sense of purpose, of your sense of wholeness. Can't shift that burden onto your spouse. Happiness is an inside job. It remains an inside job, even as an expat, even as a supporting spouse or a trailing spouse. I hate the term trailing spouse because it sounds
Don't say
like
that. That's the name of our show. How can you say you hate it?
But I hate it.
Girl,
it is the reality of what it is. But sometimes initially I hated it because it made me feel like I was like dead roadkill being drugged behind a car, like I was just trailing behind somebody.
Let's change the picture.
I know.
You're a trailing spouse now who is supportively trailing because you've got kids.
Yes.
You've got babies that need that support now. So they're trailing behind you because mama's got this whole thing going.
Yeah.
So they're coming up behind you, and you're being the support for the person who's leading the way into all these different lands and all these different places.
Well, and you know what changed the idea of trailing spouses for me? I looked at the definition and the concept of leadership, and the fact that we all have a role to play in leading in our families. And there is nothing wrong. I know some people really get into different gender roles and all of that, but there is nothing wrong with being the backbone of your family. So trailing in the sense of, if you look at a pack of wolves and a wolf pack, and on that trail that they're on, the weakest wolves are in the front. The strongest wolves that are the hunters, that are young, are in the middle, because they're making sure that those wolves are okay. They put them out front, they get behind them. The actual leaders are in the back of the trail. They're making sure that no one gets left behind. They're making sure that everybody else in the pack is doing what they're supposed to do. They're supporting the stronger ones that are working, that are fighting, that are finding the food. And they're supporting the weaker ones that are out front and keeping an eye on them to make sure that the trajectory of the pack is going where they need to be. That's what made me okay with the term of trailing spouse. I know it sounds bad to a lot of people, and I do think that companies now are making a shift. They are using supporting spouse, accompanying spouse. The narrative matters, but the mindset matters the most. And I think you have to get comfortable with what your role is within your family structure for this particular season. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just there's a wrong way. Wrong way being whatever is unhealthy for the family unit, unhealthy for yourself. Yes, but whatever, there's no predefined way of doing it that makes sense. It's whatever works for you. We talked about on a previous episode about finding purpose and goals and reinventing yourself and having reasons to get up. It will help you to settle into that particular role, but you cannot take it out on your spouse. It is not your spouse's day. They're not your proverbial whipping post, because
that's your life partner. So you cannot punch on your life partner. Yes, there'll be bad days.
Yes.
We're not saying everything is rosy. There are bad days. This is why it's called the trailing spouse syndrome.
Yes. And trailing spouse syndrome is real. I've been through it. I have been there. I didn't even know at the time that I was there, because I didn't know it was a thing. I had to get my mind right. I had to really reposition myself to say, okay, Juanita, from the moment you hit the ground there, in addition to being a wife and a mother, what's going to be your purpose? What are you going to do for you? We're going to shift. We're going to change. Prepare for the shift. I think preparing for the shift really, really helped me. And then also my spouse evolved. Marriages evolve. People evolve.
Change. People grow.
Yes. And sometimes, like you said, the bad days, when you have bad days, your spouse is going to have to give you a little extra grace, a little extra sensitivity. For those of us who had careers prior to this and maybe walked away from a career, and not to say that we regret it, because there's a season for everything, but there are moments where your spouse needs to be a little more sensitive and understanding. And this is what we talk about, the evolution of going from a dragging spouse to a sponsoring spouse, a supporting spouse. You have to understand, and I'm just going to speak to, let's just say stereotypically, if it were a husband and your wife left her job and she's supporting you and coming over. When you walk through the door, husband, there's nothing in your life that's starving. So yes, she gets to spend more time with the kids. Yes, she gets to stay at home. However, when you walk through the door, fatherhood isn't being starved, because your kids are like, Daddy, and they give you hugs. And yes, you haven't spent as much time as she spent with them, but they aren't gone. You're not starving. Your purpose isn't starving. You have a job, you have things that you want to do, some reason to get up every morning. Every aspect of you, theoretically, is not starving. Your wife, on the other hand, there's a piece of her that is being starved. Now, willfully, pieces, possibly, yes, multiple pieces that are being starved. Willfully, we chose to do so. Doesn't always feel like starvation sometimes every day, but there will be days where the impact will be felt, where we will be greater than other days, where that aspect that's being starved, the hunger pain, will be greater some days than other. In the beginning, when I was in London, I really missed being a lawyer, and I was starving. That aspect of me was hungry and starving, and it was a great deal of pain, and I had to navigate through that. You got to be sensitive in your spouse's navigation of starvation in their aspect of their life.
Got to be aware.
You got to.
And be present.
Yes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, whether you are an accompanying spouse or a sponsoring spouse, I think today in this episode we've learned the ways that we can all be supportive of each other in this journey of actually just moving from one place to the next in different lands and different adventures with each other, with ourselves, with our careers, with our lives and our families. I hope that you will join us again for a following episode where we will definitely be sharing much more knowledge, a lot of wisdom, that's for sure, and a little bit more fun.
Yes. Thank you so much for tuning in.